In our last video, we showed you how Elon Musk bought the world. We showed you how he controls the satellites, the rockets, and the public square. It feels like he is the ultimate power. But he isn't. Elon Musk has a boss. In fact, almost every company you use every single day has the same boss. When you buy a coffee at Starbucks, you are paying them. When you check into a Hilton hotel, you are paying them. When you fill up your car at Exxon, buy a ticket on Delta Airlines, or even when you watch the news on Fox or CNN, you are feeding the same beast. You have probably heard the name BlackRock. You might know them as a boring asset manager, a company that manages retirement funds, a company that wears suits and talks about diversified portfolios. But that is a mask. BlackRock is not a bank. It is not a hedge fund. It is the fourth branch of government. It is the only entity in history that has effectively privatized the entire global economy. They control $10 trillion of assets directly. But through their technology, they oversee more than $25 trillion. To put that in perspective, that is more money than the GDP of the United States. If BlackRock were a country, it would be the third largest superpower on Earth, right behind China and the United States. So, who are they? And how did a company that did not even exist 40 years ago become the owner of everything? This is the story of the man who manages the world, Larry Fink. Ironically, his empire started with a failure. The year is 1986. Larry Fink is a legend on Wall Street. He is a young, hotshot trader at First Boston. He has literally invented a new way to make money called the mortgage-backed security. He is generating millions of dollars in profit. He is on track to become the chief executive officer. And then, one morning, he wakes up and he has lost $100 million. He did not see it coming. Interest rates shifted in a way his models did not predict. He went from being the golden boy to the guy who lost $100 million. He was humiliated. He was fired. But as he walked out of that building, carrying his box of personal belongings, he did not feel sorry for himself. He felt angry. He realized that Wall Street was blind. Everyone was gambling, but nobody was calculating the risk. They were all looking at the potential profit, but nobody was looking at the downside. He vowed that he would never be blind again. He gathered a small team of mathematicians and computer scientists. He did not want to build a bank that made bets. He wanted to build a machine that saw the future. He pitched the idea to another Wall Street titan, Stephen Schwarzman of Blackstone. Schwarzman gave him a $5 million line of credit. They named the new company Blackstone Financial Management. Blackstone backed the project. It started in a single room. It was boring. It was safe. It was profitable. But Larry Fink wanted more. He wanted to scale. He wanted to sell his risk management service to everyone. Schwarzman said no. He did not want to dilute the company. So, in 1994, they split. Larry Fink renamed his company BlackRock. It was a divorce that would change history. Stephen Schwarzman later called selling BlackRock a heroic mistake. Because while Blackstone became a giant in private equity, BlackRock became the operating system of capitalism itself. Fink did not just hire traders. He hired rocket scientists. He spent years building a supercomputer that could model every single asset in the global economy. He called it Aladdin. To understand why BlackRock is more powerful than a government, you have to understand Aladdin. It stands for Asset, Liability, Debt, and Derivative Investment Network. It sounds like a boring acronym, but in reality, it is the most powerful piece of software ever written. Imagine a video game. In the game, you can simulate a disaster. You can ask what happens if a conflict starts in Europe. The game calculates the damage. Aladdin does that for the real world. It monitors $21.6 trillion of assets every single second. It watches every stock trade, every bond yield, every political election, and every shift in the weather. It allows Larry Fink to ask, what if? What if the euro collapses? What if a pandemic hits? Aladdin runs millions of Monte Carlo simulations every night. It predicts the future by analyzing the past. It tells investors exactly where to move their money to survive the crash. This software is BlackRock's secret. It is why every major bank in the world pays them to use it. They are addicted to the data. But the moment BlackRock went from participant to sovereign was 2008, the global financial crisis. The world was burning. Lehman Brothers had collapsed. Banks were lying about what they owned. Nobody knew which assets were toxic and which were safe. The US government was panicked. The Treasury Secretary realized he had a problem. The government had to bail out the banks, but the government did not have the technology to analyze the toxic assets. They were flying blind. So, who did they call? They did not call the CIA. They did not call Goldman Sachs. They called Larry Fink. They hired BlackRock to analyze the collapse. They gave BlackRock the keys to the Treasury. Larry Fink's team used Aladdin to sort through the wreckage of Wall Street. They decided which banks lived and which banks died. Think about the insanity of that moment. A private company and unelected asset manager was effectively running the Federal Reserve. They did such a good job that they were hired again in 2020. When the pandemic crashed the market, the Federal Reserve hired BlackRock again to manage the bond buying program. This is the definition of state capture. The US government cannot function in a crisis without BlackRock's software. Aladdin is not just a product anymore. It is critical infrastructure. But having the ultimate crystal ball was not enough for Larry Fink. He did not just want to predict the market. He wanted to control it. And this brings us to the passive investing trap. For decades, if you wanted to invest in the stock market, you had to pick a stock. You bought Apple, or you bought Ford. BlackRock popularized the exchange-traded fund, also called an ETF. Instead of picking one company, you buy a basket. You buy the S&P 500. You buy a tiny slice of the top 500 companies in America. It sounds great. It is cheap. It is safe. It is easy. But here is the trick. When you buy an iShares ETF, you put up the money and you take the risk. BlackRock, however, keeps the vote. Every share of stock comes with a vote. It lets you vote for the chief executive officer, for the board of directors, and on company policy. Because BlackRock manages trillions of dollars of these funds, they control the votes for almost every major company in America. They own 7% of Apple, 8% of Exxon, and 6% of McDonald's. On paper, 7% does not sound like a lot. But in the corporate world, it makes you the king. Most other shareholders are small. When BlackRock walks into the room, the chief executive officer listens, or the chief executive officer can be fired. This is where the story gets dark. Larry Fink realized he could use this voting power to force companies to do what he wanted. For 100 years, the rule of capitalism was simple: make money for the shareholders. If a company made a profit, it was good. If it lost money, it was bad. Larry Fink decided to change the rules. He introduced a new concept. He called it stakeholder capitalism. You might know it by another name, ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Fink began writing annual letters to chief executive officers around the world. In those letters, he issued an ultimatum. He warned that if companies did not adopt his sustainability goals, reduce their carbon footprint, and hire diverse boards, BlackRock would vote against them. Suddenly, corporate America shifted overnight. Why does every oil company now have a green energy commercial? Why does every Hollywood movie suddenly carry similar political messaging? Why do brands risk their reputation to push a social agenda? It is not because they suddenly became progressive. It is because they are terrified of their landlord. They need a high ESG score to keep BlackRock happy. If BlackRock were to dump their shares, the company could collapse. Larry Fink has effectively created a social credit system for corporations. He is bypassing the democratic process. He does not need to lobby Congress to pass a law. He can simply threaten a chief executive officer's job. But it gets even more personal. BlackRock is not just buying stocks. They are buying your neighborhood. In the last few years, asset managers have started buying up single-family homes across America. They buy them in cash, outbidding ordinary families. They are not flipping them. They are turning them into permanent rentals. The famous line from the World Economic Forum, "You will own nothing and you will be happy," is becoming a reality. BlackRock invests heavily in companies that are building build-to-rent communities. Entire neighborhoods where no one owns the home they live in. Everyone pays rent to a corporation forever. It is the return of feudalism. But instead of a lord in a castle, it is an algorithm in a server room. And the genius of it all, you cannot fight them. If you boycott Target, BlackRock owns the competitor Walmart. If you boycott Coke, BlackRock owns Pepsi. If you boycott CNN, BlackRock owns Fox News. They own the competition. This is called circular ownership. It is an illusion of choice. No matter which door you walk through, all the money flows up to the same place. But owning your house was not enough. Recently, BlackRock decided to go bigger, much bigger. If you think buying neighborhoods is ambitious, try buying a country. In 2023, while the conflict in Ukraine was still raging, President Zelensky did not fly to Washington to meet the World Bank. He flew to New York to meet Larry Fink. They signed a historic deal. BlackRock was not just going to invest in Ukraine, they were officially hired to coordinate the entire reconstruction of the nation. Think about what that means. When the conflict ends, Ukraine will need new power grids, new roads, new schools. The estimated cost is over $750 billion. BlackRock is now the gatekeeper of that money. They helped launch the Ukraine Development Fund. If you want to build a bridge in Kiev, you do not just need the government's permission, you effectively need Larry Fink's permission. This signals a terrifying shift in global power. For 70 years, when a country was destroyed, the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund stepped in. These are public institutions. They are theoretically accountable to nations. Now we have privatized the Marshall Plan. We have entered an era where a private asset manager has more geopolitical influence than the United Nations. Larry Fink is not just a CEO anymore. He is a head of state without a border. And this state-building strategy is not stopping at Ukraine. In 2024, BlackRock spent $12.5 billion to acquire global infrastructure partners. This was a massive pivot. Larry Fink realized that paper assets, stocks, and bonds are fragile, but real assets are forever. Through this deal, BlackRock became the owner of Gatwick Airport in London. They own the Port of Melbourne. They own water and waste companies across the world. They are no longer just betting on the economy. They are the economy. If you fly out of London, you pay BlackRock. If you drink water in France, you pay BlackRock. If you turn on the lights in parts of the US, you pay BlackRock. They are building a world where every basic human necessity, shelter, travel, water, energy, is a line item on their balance sheet. But there was one asset class that was supposed to be immune to BlackRock. One asset that was built specifically to destroy the banks: Bitcoin. For years, Larry Fink hated Bitcoin. He called it an index of money laundering. He told investors to stay away. But Larry Fink is not an idealist. He is a shark. And when a shark sees blood, it feeds. He watched as Bitcoin survived crash after crash. He realized it was not going away. He realized that trillions of dollars of wealth were sitting in this digital gold, outside of his control. So, he did what BlackRock always does. He did not fight it. He bought it. In 2024, BlackRock launched IBIT, their Bitcoin exchange-traded fund. Crypto enthusiasts cheered. They thought, Wall Street finally accepts us. They were wrong. Wall Street did not accept them. Wall Street ate them. Within months, BlackRock's exchange-traded fund vacuumed up massive amounts of Bitcoin. They became one of the largest holders of the currency on Earth. And just like that, the revolution was over. Bitcoin was created to be peer-to-peer cash. It was supposed to be decentralized. No middlemen, no banks. But now, most people do not own Bitcoin. They own shares of the BlackRock Bitcoin Trust. BlackRock holds the keys. BlackRock runs the nodes. BlackRock collects the fees. They effectively gentrified the entire crypto market. They took the most rebellious technology of the 21st century and turned it into a boring, regulated financial product that sits in your 401k right next to your Coca-Cola stock. This is the ultimate power of the sovereign. They do not need to invent the technology. They wait for you to invent it. They wait for you to take the risk. And once it works, they use their infinite capital to buy the infrastructure. They did it with housing. They did it with Ukraine. And now they have done it with the future of money. So let's look at the evolution. Larry Fink started as the gambler who lost $100 million because he was blind. He became the architect who built Aladdin to see the future. And now, he is the emperor. The man who uses your own retirement money to buy the companies you work for and force them to follow his rules. He has done what no conqueror in history could do. He conquered the world without firing a single shot. He just bought it with our money. But here is the final question. If BlackRock owns the banks, and BlackRock owns the media, and BlackRock runs the government's financial software, who watches BlackRock? The answer is no one. And while we are all arguing about red versus blue, or left versus right, Larry Fink is quietly redesigning the world in his image. But there is one thing BlackRock cannot control. They can control the money. They can control the corporations. But they cannot control the information. Not entirely. There is one company that knows even more about you than BlackRock. A company that has read every email you have ever written. A company that knows where you are right now. And unlike BlackRock, they did not start on Wall Street. They started in a garage with the motto, "Don't be evil." Up next, we show you how Google has evolved and become the ultimate spy, and why they might be the only power left that can challenge the financial throne.